I never expected to find my boss, the woman who made my life hell for 3 years, sobbing on my doorstep at 2 a.m. with mascara streaking down her face. But what happened the next morning would change both our lives forever. Mark Reynolds stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over the decline button. It was the 5th call from his boss in the last 20 minutes. Normally, he would have ignored it without a second thought, especially on a Friday night, when he finally had some precious time with his daughter. But something felt different about tonight. "Daddy, who keeps calling?" 8-year-old Lily asked, looking up from her coloring book spread across their small apartment's coffee table. "It's just work, sweetie," Mark replied, forcing a smile. "Nothing important." The phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call, but a text message. "Please help. I'm in trouble." Mark sighed, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. Victoria Winters, his boss at Reynolds Marketing Agency, no relation to him, as she often pointedly reminded everyone, was notorious for her cold demeanor and unreasonable demands. The woman had made his life miserable since he'd started working there 3 years ago, especially after he became a single dad when his wife walked out. The late nights, the weekend work, the constant criticism, all while he struggled to raise Lily alone. Yet, something about that text message stirred something in him. Maybe it was the simple please that Victoria had never used before. "Mrs. Garcia is coming over to watch you for a little bit," Mark told Lily, already dialing their neighbor. "Daddy needs to help someone." 30 minutes later, Mark pulled up outside the Velvet Lounge, an upscale bar in the business district, where many of their clients like to close deals. Through the window, he could see Victoria sitting alone at the bar. Her normally perfect posture slumped as she argued with the bartender, who appeared to be holding her car keys. When he entered, the scene became clearer. Victoria was clearly intoxicated, her designer blouse stained with what looked like red wine, her usually immaculate hair falling out of its tight bun. "I'm fine to drive," she was insisting, her words slurring. "Do you know who I am? I could buy this entire establishment." "Ma'am, I've called you a cab," the bartender replied firmly. "I'm not giving you back your keys, Mark," Victoria exclaimed when she spotted him, her face lighting up with unexpected relief. "Tell this person who I am." The bartender looked at Mark with raised eyebrows. "You know her." "She's my boss," Mark admitted. "I'll take her home." What Mark didn't know, as he helped Victoria to his car, was that across the street, one of their biggest clients was watching the entire scene unfold, a client who had just been considering pulling their multi-million-dollar account after Victoria had been particularly harsh during their meeting earlier that day. And what Victoria didn't know was that Mark had just sacrificed the one night that month he had planned to finish the storybook he was writing for Lily's upcoming birthday. "Why are you helping me?" Victoria mumbled as Mark buckled her seatbelt. "I'm terrible to you." Mark paused, considering the question. "Because it's the right thing to do," he finally said. "And because everyone deserves a second chance." Little did Mark know that those words would echo in Victoria's mind long after the alcohol had worn off, setting in motion events that would test both their characters in ways neither could imagine. The drive to Victoria's upscale penthouse apartment was mostly silent, broken only by her occasional directions and a few incoherent mumbles. When they arrived, Mark realized he would need to help her inside. She could barely stand, let alone walk. "Keys?" he asked gently. Victoria fumbled through her designer purse before producing a key card. As they made their way through the lobby, the night doorman gave them a knowing look that made Mark's cheeks burn with embarrassment. "It's not what you think," he started to explain, but the doorman just nodded with a smile that suggested he'd seen it all before. Victoria's apartment was exactly what Mark had imagined: minimalist, expensive, and cold. Everything was white, black, or chrome without a single personal photo or memento visible. It felt more like a hotel suite than a home. "Bathroom," Victoria mumbled urgently. Mark helped her to what he hoped was the right door, then retreated to the kitchen to get her some water. As he searched through perfectly organized cabinets for a glass, he noticed a single photograph magnetized to the refrigerator. Victoria, much younger, with an older woman who shared her features. Both were smiling in a way he had never seen his boss smile. "That's my mother," Victoria said, startling him. She had emerged from the bathroom looking marginally better, though still unsteady. "She died 5 years ago today." The simple statement hung in the air between them, suddenly explaining everything about this night. "I'm sorry," Mark said, handing her the water. "I lost my dad when I was young. Those anniversaries never get easier." Victoria took the glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Why are you being kind to me? I've been nothing but cruel to you." Before Mark could answer, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it, and her face palled. "It's Richard Townsend," she whispered, referring to the CEO of their largest client. "Don't answer," Mark advised. "Not in your condition." But Victoria was already accepting the call, switching instantly to a professional tone that barely betrayed her intoxication. "Richard, what a pleasant surprise." Mark could hear the angry voice on the other end of the line. "Something about unprofessional behavior and reconsidering our partnership." Victoria's face crumpled as she realized what was happening. "Richard, please, I can explain." Mark surprised himself by gently taking the phone from her hand. "Mr. Townsend, this is Mark Reynolds. I apologize for the interruption, but Miss Winters has just received some devastating personal news and was trying to process it privately. I'm helping her get home safely. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting on Monday to discuss any concerns you might have." There was a long pause before Richard responded, his tone noticeably softer. Mark continued the conversation, somehow managing to not only smooth things over, but also secure a tentative agreement for an expanded campaign. When he hung up, Victoria was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "You saved my career," she said quietly. "After everything I've done to make your life difficult," Mark shrugged. "Like I said, everyone deserves a second chance." As he helped Victoria to her bedroom and ensured she had water and aspirin for the morning, Mark wondered if she would even remember any of this tomorrow. In his experience, people like Victoria Winters didn't change overnight, and they certainly didn't acknowledge moments of weakness. "I should go," he said, turning to leave. "My daughter is waiting." "Your daughter," Victoria repeated, her voice small. "Lily, right? The one whose recital I wouldn't let you attend last month." Mark was surprised she remembered. "Yes, I'm sorry, Mark," Victoria whispered, already drifting towards sleep. "I'm so sorry." Mark didn't respond. He'd heard drunk apologies before. They rarely meant anything in the light of day. As he drove home, exhaustion settling into his bones, Mark prepared himself for Monday morning, when Victoria would undoubtedly pretend none of this had ever happened. That's how these things always went. The powerful never acknowledged their moments of vulnerability to those beneath them. What Mark couldn't possibly know, as he quietly thanked Mrs. Garcia and checked on his sleeping daughter, was that Victoria Winters lay awake in her expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, making a decision that would transform both their lives. Monday morning arrived with the usual chaos of a single parent's household: spilled cereal, missing homework, and a last-minute scramble to catch the school bus. By the time Mark arrived at the office, he was already exhausted, and the day hadn't even properly begun. He braced himself as he approached Victoria's office, expecting either cold dismissal or outright hostility. What he didn't expect was to find her waiting by his desk with 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, Mark," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "I got you coffee. Black with 1 sugar, right?" Mark stared at her, momentarily speechless. In 3 years, Victoria had never once remembered how he took his coffee, let alone brought him any. "Thank you," he managed, accepting the cup cautiously, as if it might be some kind of trap. "I'd like to speak with you in my office when you have a moment," she continued. Her usual commanding tone softened into something almost like a request. As Mark followed her, he noticed the office was buzzing with confused whispers. Victoria Winters bringing coffee to an employee. Something was definitely wrong. Once inside her office, Victoria closed the door and turned to face him. She looked different somehow, still impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I remember everything about Friday night," she said without preamble. "I want you to know that." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "It's really not necessary to." "It is necessary," Victoria interrupted. "You helped me when you had every reason not to. You protected my reputation with Richard Townsend. You were kind when I've been nothing but cruel to you." She moved to her desk and picked up a folder. "I've been reviewing your personnel file all weekend. You've consistently been one of our top performers, despite the fact that I've denied your requests for flexible hours, overlooked you for promotion twice, and generally made your life difficult." Mark didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Victoria Winters he knew. "My behavior has been inexcusable," she continued. "Professionally and personally, I've been taking my own pain out on others, especially you, and it stops today." She handed him the folder. Inside was paperwork for a promotion to senior creative director, a position 2 levels above his current role. "This comes with a 40% salary increase and flexible working hours," Victoria explained. "You'll report directly to me, but you'll have autonomy over your projects and your schedule." Mark stared at the papers in disbelief. "Why?" Victoria's professional facade cracked slightly. "Because you deserve it. Because I've been punishing you for having what I lost, a family that needs you." For the first time, Mark saw Victoria as a person rather than just his tyrannical boss. "Your mother," he said softly. Victoria nodded, turning to look out the window. "She was everything to me. When she died, I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense. I resented anyone who had priorities outside this office." She turned back to face him. "Especially you with your daughter, and your constant reminders that some things are more important than quarterly reports." Mark thought about all the times he'd had to choose between his daughter's needs and Victoria's demands. All the school events missed, the bedtime stories cut short, the weekends sacrificed. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Victoria said, "but I want you to know that I'm not pretending Friday night didn't happen. It was a wake-up call I desperately needed." Before Mark could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily's school. His heart sank as he read it. "Li's sick," he said, already gathering his things. "I need to go pick her up." In the past, this would have earned him a cutting remark about priorities and commitment. Instead, Victoria nodded. "Of course, take the rest of the day. Is there anything you need?" Mark paused at the door, still trying to process this new reality. "No, I think we'll be okay." "Mark," Victoria called as he was leaving. "I meant what I said. Things are going to be different around here." As Mark rushed to his daughter's school, he wondered if this change of heart would last. People made promises in moments of clarity or gratitude, but they rarely followed through when the moment passed. What he didn't know was that Victoria Winters had spent the entire weekend confronting truths she'd been running from for years, and that his simple act of kindness had cracked open a door she'd kept firmly shut since her mother's death. 3 days later, Mark was working from home while Lily recovered from a nasty flu when his doorbell rang. Opening it revealed Victoria standing awkwardly in the hallway of his modest apartment building, holding a large gift bag and what appeared to be a container of soup. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I just wanted to check on Lily." "And you?" Mark invited her in, watching with fascination as the woman who commanded boardrooms with iron authority now stood nervously in his cluttered living room. "I brought chicken soup," Victoria explained, holding out the container. "It's my mother's recipe, and some books I thought Lily might enjoy while she's recovering." Before Mark could respond, Lily appeared in the hallway wrapped in her favorite blanket. "Daddy, who's here?" she asked, her voice from her sore throat. "This is Ms. Winters," Mark explained. "My boss." Lily's eyes widened. The dragon lady. Mark wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Lily." To his astonishment, Victoria laughed, a genuine warm sound he'd never heard from her before. "Yes, the dragon lady," she confirmed, kneeling down to Lily's level. "Though I'm trying very hard not to breathe fire anymore." Lily studied her with a frank curiosity only children possess. "Daddy says you're very smart, but you don't know how to be happy." Mark closed his eyes in mortification. "Lily, that's not exactly." "Your daddy is right," Victoria interrupted gently. "I forgot how to be happy for a while, but I'm learning again." The simple honesty of this exchange shifted something in the atmosphere. As Victoria sat with Lily, listening to the little girl explain the plot of her favorite book, Mark observed a side of his boss he never knew existed. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch and Victoria had helped Mark clean up the dinner dishes, another surreal experience. They sat at his small kitchen table with cups of tea. "Thank you for coming," Mark said. It meant a lot to Lily. Victoria traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said Friday night about second chances." She looked up at him, vulnerability clear in her eyes. "Do you think people can really change, Mark? Or do we just become better at hiding who we really are?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to fully explore. "I think," Mark said carefully, "that who we really are isn't fixed. We're shaped by our experiences, our choices, our pain. But we can choose to be shaped differently." Victoria nodded slowly. "My mother used to say something similar. Before she got sick, she was the kindest person I knew. Watching her suffer changed me. I built walls to protect myself and didn't realize I was trapping myself inside them." Mark thought about his own walls constructed after his wife left him and Lily, how he'd poured everything into being a good father and a reliable employee, never allowing himself to want anything more. "Maybe we both have some walls that need to come down," he suggested quietly. The look Victoria gave him then, open, unguarded, hopeful, made something shift in his chest. What neither of them realized in that moment was that their story was just beginning. That Victoria's transformation wasn't just about becoming a better boss, but about rediscovering the person she'd been before grief hardened her heart. That Mark's compassion had not only earned him a promotion, but had opened a door to possibilities he'd long since stopped imagining for himself. In the months that followed, the office watched in amazement as Victoria Winters became almost unrecognizable, still brilliant and demanding, but also fair, supportive, and occasionally even kind. They whispered about what could have possibly changed her, creating elaborate theories that never came close to the simple truth. The truth was that on a Friday night, when she was at her lowest, Victoria had experienced something she'd forgotten existed. Unconditional kindness from someone who had every reason to turn his back on her. And in that moment, she'd glimpsed a version of herself she thought had died with her mother. As for Mark, he found himself thriving both professionally and personally. With his new position and flexible schedule, he never missed another of Lily's school events. The storybook he'd been writing for her birthday was not only finished, but with Victoria's encouragement and connections, was being considered by a publisher. And if anyone noticed that the fearsome Victoria Winters now regularly joined Mark and Lily for weekend outings to museums, parks, and ice cream shops, they were wise enough not to comment on it directly, at least not where either of them could hear. 6 months after that fateful Friday night, Mark and Victoria sat on a park bench watching Lily chase butterflies in the late spring sunshine. Do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't answered my call that night? Victoria asked. Mark considered the question sometimes. But then I remember something my father used to say. The most important moments in our lives often don't announce themselves. They just happen, and we only recognize them in retrospect. Victoria smiled, watching Lily, who had now befriended another little girl and was showing her how to make daisy chains. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was, Mark agreed. He also would have liked you once you stopped being the dragon lady. Victoria laughed, a sound that had become wonderfully familiar over the past months. I'm not sure I've completely shed the scales yet. No, Mark admitted with a grin, but they're more like glitter now than armor. As they sat in comfortable silence, Mark found himself thinking about the journey they'd taken. From adversaries to colleagues to friends to whatever they were becoming now, something neither of them had put into words yet, but that hung in the air between them during quiet moments like this one. What Mark didn't know was that Victoria had spent the previous night staring at her mother's photograph, having a long overdue conversation with the woman who had taught her about love before pain made her forget. I think I'm ready, Victoria said suddenly, turning to face him. Ready for what? Mark asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew. Ready to stop being afraid, she replied. Ready to admit that what happened that night wasn't just about you saving my job or me becoming a better boss. It was about two people who had built walls finding a door in them. Mark's heart raced as he looked into her eyes. Eyes that no longer held the cold calculation he'd known for years, but instead shone with something warm and genuine. Victoria, he began, but she shook her head. Let me finish. I've spent my entire adult life convinced that vulnerability was weakness, that needing others was a flaw to be corrected. I pushed away anyone who might see past my defenses because I couldn't bear the thought of losing someone I cared about again. She took a deep breath. But watching you with Lily, seeing how your love for her makes you stronger, not weaker, it's changed everything I thought I knew. Mark reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. For what it's worth, you've changed everything for us too. Lily used to ask why I always look tired. Now she asks when Ms. Victoria is coming over next. Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. And what about you, Mark? What do you ask? The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. In the distance, Lily's laughter floated on the spring breeze. I ask, Mark said softly, if you might consider being part of our story for more than just this chapter. Victoria's answer came not in words, but in the way she leaned forward, closing the distance between them with a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning. 1 year to the day after that fateful Friday night, Mark stood in the doorway of what had once been Victoria's cold, impersonal apartment, now transformed with family photographs, Lily's artwork, and the comfortable chaos of a home filled with love. Victoria was in the kitchen attempting to recreate her mother's lasagna recipe, while Lily helped by sprinkling far too much cheese on top. Neither of them had noticed him watching them yet, and Mark took a moment to savor the scene. If someone had told him 2 years ago that his tyrannical boss would become the woman who made his daughter giggle uncontrollably, and who looked at him as if he'd hung the moon, he would have thought they were delusional. Yet here they were, building something beautiful from the most unlikely beginning. Are you going to stand there all night, or are you going to help us with this culinary disaster? Victoria called out, finally spotting him. Mark joined them in the kitchen, dropping a kiss on Lily's head and another on Victoria's lips. Just enjoying the view. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed and they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Victoria handed him a small wrapped package. What's this? Mark asked, surprised. Open it and see, Victoria replied, an unusual nervousness in her voice. Inside was a first edition copy of the children's book his father had read to him countless times, the one he'd mentioned once months ago in passing. "How did you find this?" he asked, running his fingers reverently over the cover. "I have my ways," Victoria said with a small smile. "Read the inscription." Mark opened the book to find Victoria's elegant handwriting on the first page. To Mark and Lily, some people save others, without realizing they're saving themselves in the process. Thank you for the second chance I didn't know I needed. I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure neither of us ever forgets what matters most. All my love, Victoria. Below the inscription was a small velvet box. Mark looked up at Victoria, his heart pounding. "I'm not very good at this," Victoria admitted, taking the box from him with slightly trembling hands. "I've never done it before, but I know that I want to be part of your story, yours and Lily's, for all the chapters to come." She opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "I'm not asking to replace anyone, or to change what you and Lily have built together. I'm asking if there might be room for me and your family officially, permanently, completely." Mark looked at the woman before him, the woman who had once made his work, life miserable, who had transformed herself through sheer determination and love, who now looked at him with such vulnerable hope and knew there was only one possible answer. "There has always been room for you," he said, pulling her into his arms. "We were just waiting for you to find your way home." As they held each other under the stars, both thinking of the unlikely path that had brought them to this moment, Mark couldn't help but marvel at how a single act of kindness on a dark night had changed everything. Sometimes the most important crossroads in our lives don't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive as inconvenient phone calls on Friday nights, as moments of compassion when resentment would be easier, as second chances given without expectation of return. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to answer those calls, to offer that compassion, to give those second chances, we find ourselves exactly where we're meant to be, with people who were always meant to be part of our story. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected connection and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us how a single moment of kindness can change everything. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unlikely places.